Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Anastasia Buchok, and I work on the knowledge management component of the Global NEP Update project. Thank you for taking the time to attend this regional training on POPs and border control, HS code classification and practical application, which is organized by Green Growth Knowledge Partnership, GGKP, under the GEF-funded and UNEP-led Global NEP Update project, GEF ID 10785. POPs, or persistent organic pollutants, are hazardous chemicals that accumulate in the environment and the living organisms, posing serious risks to human health and ecosystems. And national implementation plans under the Stockholm Convention require parties to develop accurate POPs inventories, where many countries are heavily relying on the import and export data, which is provided by the customs authorities. And while there are a lot of ongoing efforts to regulate the trade by banning production and use of hazardous chemicals and also introducing the custom codes or HS codes, there is still a need to build the capacity on how these two work together. And this training, we hope, will strengthen your understanding on what is the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm Conventions, what is POPs, and what is the harmonized system, and how this all together can be used to identify the POPs and what can be done in case of POPs containing products in the trade flows. So this session primarily targets environmental agencies and customs authorities from Europe, Africa, and Asia, but it remains open to all the stakeholders from other organizations and the regions. And a few housekeeping rules from our end. This is an online session. It will last 2 hours and it will be recorded. Interpretation is available in French and Russian, and please select your language in the Zoom toolbar. We welcome your active engagement. If you would like to ask a question, you may use the chat or Q&A module, or you can raise your hand. And in the end of the session, when we have a Q&A time, we will promote you to the panelists so that you can turn on your camera and microphone and join the discussion in the very end. So for those colleagues who will have questions and would like to join the panel, please raise your hand and we will assist you in the end of the session. Finally, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat. We would love to know who is attending this event today. And with that, let me just quickly introduce our next speaker, the first speaker, Melissa Lim, Program Management Officer at the BRS Secretariat. Melissa is actively involved in the work of Secretariat related to the harmonized system. With that, it's my pleasure to hand over the floor to Melissa to open this session. Over to you, Melissa, and thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to be here with you and to talk about a topic that's close to my heart, custom codes and how they can facilitate the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. And today we will, we will be looking at what custom codes are, why they are useful for implementations of the 3 conventions, and also then do we actually have codes if they are useful, and if we don't, how do we get new ones? But first, let me go into why we need custom codes, and it's all explained in this picture that you see here. I'm sure you're all very familiar with what you're seeing because it's a kind of product that everyone has been in contact with to some extent, and it's present in every country of the world because this is what powers automotive vehicles, cars, buses, and they are lead acid batteries. These are very simple products, chemically speaking. You have 2 lead electrodes sitting in a bath of acid surrounded by a plastic casing. And although all countries have this in their somehow in use, not every country has the resources to produce the components of these products. So Either you have to import the lead or you have to import the batteries. And as long as they are in use, there's relatively low risks of exposure. I mean, they are in cars and buses, and so it's not really an issue. However, at the end of life, right, it's important that the batteries are managed in such a way that the acids don't end up in the environment, because then you have, for example, risk of poisoning of wastewaters, and of course, lead itself is a very damaging toxicant. So it has to be the smelting of lead to make new lead, well, of the electrodes, have to be done under conditions where there's no exposure to the environment, releases to the environment, and human and environmental exposure. And unfortunately, not all countries have the capabilities to do that in a way that really protects the environment. So even at the end of life stage, I explained to you that there's trade involved at the beginning, but there's trade also involved at the end of life stage. And many countries send their waste lead acid batteries to other countries for environmentally sound disposal. Now, as I said, this is a relatively simple product. So when it gets to the facility, it's relatively easy for the facility to know how to manage this waste, right? There's lead, there's acid, there's plastics. Now we're looking at another very familiar product to all of you. That's a cell phone. And it's a little bit more complicated because, I mean, a few hundreds of chemicals go into the manufacturing of a cell phone, also involving a lot of trade upstream. But unlike for a battery, there's little information about what is actually inside a cell phone, right? So, I mean, the last time I bought one, there was nothing on the box to tell me what actually is contained in it. But the same kind of requirement for management apply to the cell phone as to the battery. When it reaches the end of life, the people at the end need to know what it contains so that they can make sure they manage it in a way to minimize exposure to the environment and to people. And I'm picking a cell phone, but that applies to a range of more complex electronics and all kinds of products that are in everyday use. So this is to say that the flow of information across the life cycle is essential for protecting human health and the environment from the risk that arise from chemicals. And this is providing this type of information is one of the central objectives of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, which provides a framework for addressing the risk along the life cycle of hazardous chemicals. And these three conventions have been around for quite a while. So the Stockholm and Rotterdam Convention are older than 20 years, and the Basel Convention have been signed more than 30 years ago. And they have quasi-universal coverage, which means that, you know, the majority of countries in the world are parties to these conventions. And now I'll briefly go into the general provisions, although we don't have time to go into detail for all of them. So the Basel Convention came into life to prevent the dumping of hazardous waste in countries that do not have the capacity to manage them. As I explained, that's the case for lead acid batteries, but for waste of many other types of products and substances. And really, it's important that this trade is controlled in a way as to prevent situations such as this. You know, if they end up where there's no capacity, then you have what we call unsound disposal, but you can see from this picture that this is much more dire than it sounds. And so the Basel Convention has at its heart what we call a prior informed consent procedure, whereby parties to the convention cannot export hazardous waste and other waste listed under the convention unless they have the explicit consent of the transit and the importing countries. The exporting countries also have to make sure that the importing country has the ability to manage these waste in an environmentally sound manner. And so this is, as I explained, a PIC procedure at the heart of the Basel Convention. And also the convention promotes environmentally sound management globally. There's one aspect linked to that. It's that if any transboundary movement of waste that doesn't happen according to this PIC procedure is to be criminalized by national legislation. So illegal traffic is a criminal issue. Now, the Rotterdam Convention is there to make sure that the information about chemicals are available globally to those countries, and in particular to those countries that do not have the capacity to evaluate chemicals. Again, some countries, well, chemicals are manufactured predominantly in some countries, and some are mostly importing them. So there's this movement, but we have to make sure that the information also moves so that the importing country can take an informed decision about whether they want to receive these chemicals. And this is what is at the heart of the Rotterdam Convention. It's the PIC procedure for export. Now, the Stockholm Convention is intent on closing the tap on the most dangerous chemicals. It's a class of chemicals known as persistent organic pollutants, and their specific characteristics make them well, very hazardous for human health and the environment. And here, the main purpose is to close the tap, meaning stop production and use. In that sense, in the medium and long term, there should be very limited trade in most POPs. But when these chemicals get added to the convention, there's usually a window of time that's allowed for countries to phase in alternatives to the POPs. And these, so they are what we call exempted uses. And during that window of time, then there is some very restricted trade that can take place. But again, this has to be done in accordance with the provision of the convention. Now, given all this emphasis around trade, it's no surprise that there's an important role for customs in implementing and enforcing these provisions. And the language that customs use to talk about trade and to share information is what we call the harmonized systems, or most commonly known as custom codes. My colleague Daniel, who's a former member of the WCO Secretariat, the World Customs Organization, and an expert in the field, will tell you more about what the harmonized system is and how it works. I'd like to highlight here, so that as a prelude to the next part of my presentation, a few important elements. So this is a multi-purpose product nomenclature, meaning it's a system of classification, which covers, in theory or in principle, almost all goods under trade. And what is it's in fact underpinned by an international convention. So there's international agreement on what this nomenclature looks like, right? And the codes that are in there, they are They are processes under the World Customs Organization where customs administrations meet to negotiate this instrument. And what's agreed at the international level are 6-digit codes. That's what are the heart of the harmonized system. However, many countries use these codes, this internationally agreed code, as a basis for tariff control and for statistical nomenclatures. And at the national level, then, these codes can be longer than 6 digits, as I will show you later in the presentation. The Rotterdam recognizing the importance of these codes requires that parties ensure that the shipping documents that accompany chemicals listed in the convention bears a custom code. And in the case of the Basel Convention, there's a notification document and a movement document that's important, essential for the PIC procedure. And it also has the custom code as one of the identifiers for the waste that being shipped. So, noting the importance of these codes, let's now look at whether we have enough sufficiently provided for implementation of the Basel Convention. I mean, for the BRS conventions. And I'm glad to say that when it comes to hazardous chemicals listed under the Rotterdam Convention, we have codes for almost all chemicals. When it comes to POPs, which are chemicals listed under the Stockholm Convention, we have codes for the majority of them also, because many chemicals are listed under both conventions. Okay. Now, the reason we have so many, we do have codes for the Rotterdam.
Melissa, I think your screen is frozen for a while. Daniel, are you here with us?
Yes, can you hear?
Okay, okay. We can hear you, Melissa. It was frozen for a while.
Indeed. And so every time there's a new chemical added to the Rotterdam Convention, the Secretariat proposes amendments to the harmonized system for identifying these codes. And this process can take quite a while because amending the harmonized system has implications for customs administrations and more broadly worldwide. So it's a deliberate and process which is negotiated within the WCO. And usually each edition of the harmonized system enter into force on average every 5 years. And so here are just some examples of chemicals for which we requested codes. And we're also working now on requesting codes for the 2 chemicals that were listed in 2025 under the Rotterdam Convention, carbosulfan and fenthion. Let's look at codes for the Stockholm Convention chemicals. And as I mentioned, because many POPs are Rotterdam Convention chemicals, we do have codes, but for most of them, but not all, because of course there are some that are not yet listed under the Rotterdam Convention. And this applies, for example, to the ones listed this year, chlorpyrifos, Launchade PFC, and UV328. And at the last Stockholm Convention Conference of the Parties, there was a request by the COP for the Secretariat to look for specific codes for this, for POPs. And another request was also to ask the WCO to issue recommendations on interim changes. So what this means is that because the process of amending the harmonized system can take a few years, parties want to be able to have these codes as soon as possible. For example, for the purpose of updating their NIPs. And what the World Customs Organization can do is that they can issue a recommendation to custom administrations to already identify the changes even before they come into force every 5 years. So it's a way to accelerate and facilitate the use of codes. So now we turn to custom codes for POPs in products or articles. And as I explained at the beginning, many chemicals are used in products, including POPs, but there's little information about what these chemicals are. And so how do you go about finding what these are in order to deal with them in an environmentally sound manner? And so this issue of traceability and waste management is a requirement for implementation of Article 6 of the Stockholm Convention. And it is admittedly quite challenging, which is an issue that has been explored by the POPs Review Committee recently, and they issued a report on this topic, which also look at some approaches that could be used to address the challenges. And one of them was in devising specific custom codes for chemicals in products. Now, recently at the COP, the Secretariat produced a report on how this could be done. How could you amend the harmonized system to identify POPs that are contained in products? And I won't go into much detail, but in a nutshell, this is what you see on the slide here exemplifies some of the approaches that could be used. At the international level, you have 6-digit codes that are agreed under the World Customs Organizations. And these codes are very specific. So in order for the WCO to agree on new codes, they need very specific information about which product needs to be identified and what they contain. And there are criteria about how this information is presented, because it's important for customs to be able to identify and classify these products globally in an objective manner. Okay, and so agreeing to these codes is a long process. And
Melissa, I think we are losing you again. Melissa?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Yes, as I explained though, beyond the 6-digit level, there are 8-digit codes, and these can be devised at the national or regional level. So as you see here, this is from the European nomenclature, and there's a 6-digit codes for specifically identifying chocolate powder containing sucrose below a certain threshold. And so that's how more specific information can be represented using the harmonized system as a basis. So as a follow-up to this report by the Secretariat, the Stockholm Convention COP issued an invitation for parties to provide information on their specific needs for 6-digit custom codes, which means which POPs and in which articles. And then in case some administrations, some countries already have specific codes for POPs in articles, meaning longer than 6-digit, then it would be useful to share that with the COP so that we can see as to whether this can also be harmonized for other countries. And this call for information is open until 31 December 2025. And you can find more about it by following the link shown on the screen here. If you also want to read about the work of the POPs Review Committee, I've left a link for you to find out about any reports and decision by this committee. Now let's turn to codes for the Basel Convention. And here is to say that there's about 60 types of waste presumed to be hazardous in the Basel Convention. And to date, despite a very long cooperation with the WCO2 on this topic, there's very few cases of one-to-one congruence. By that, I mean having a defined waste in the Basel Convention and an exact code corresponding to that waste. There are a number of reasons for why this is difficult, not least to do with the way wastes are defined, and some of the bigness about the specificities at the international level, which is not compatible with the way the codes have to be described in the harmonized system. Nevertheless, in decision BC 14/9, there was a request for the Secretariat to obtain codes for a long list of chemicals. The ones with higher priorities are shown on this slide. And I'm glad to say that we have been able to obtain codes for many of them. So importantly, electrical and electronic waste, which, as you're all aware of, is one of the most important waste stream that keeps growing every year because of the use of electronics, and which is subject to transboundary movements because many countries do not have the facilities to manage them in an environmentally sound manner. Similarly, we obtain codes for waste-lead acid batteries, which I have explained the importance of earlier on. And we are glad to say we have obtained codes for plastic waste, but new codes, and because the one existing in the current version of the HS did not reflect the plastic waste amendments to the Basel Convention that were adopted in 2019 and that were devised in order to bring more plastic waste within the scope of the Basel Convention to ensure that this doesn't, the trade doesn't result in adverse effects to the environment. There are also new codes for waste mineral oils containing a PCB and other homologs above the hazardous waste threshold. So this is also very important because there is a deadline for the elimination of PCB that's coming up. And of course, like this is a hazardous waste that can only be destroyed in certain facilities. So it has to be traded for destruction. And last but not least, we have new codes for waste pneumatic tires, which is yet another important waste stream requiring international trade for safe management. Now, having done all this, there is now a call for information issued by the last Basel Convention COP for any new waste streams for which codes are needed. And although the deadline was 30 September 2025, if you need codes for specific waste streams, you can still send them to me, and we will see whether there's capacity to prepare proposals on these codes. I'd like to point out that all these codes, having them also is very important for monitoring of international trade. And so all customs and sometimes finance administrations, depending on how these are set up in your countries, collect data on trade, and then they share this with the UN Statistical Office, which has then produced this database called ComTrade, which allows you to look at trade globally using harmonized system codes. And from this type of data, we have been able to produce compilations of information looking at the transboundary movement of plastic waste. In case this is a topic of interest, I leave you the link for consultation. And I also would like to leave you with some resources on custom codes that we have produced. The first being a list of codes for the Rotterdam Convention chemicals on our website in 3 languages, and some of the other reports that I mentioned earlier. And just again, a reminder for providing information in case you would like codes for POPs in articles or for the Basel Convention listed waste. And last but not least, in case you want to learn more about the BRS conventions, we have a wealth of electronic tools online on our website, and also which explains in a simple way what the conventions try to achieve, but also we have there in-depth courses that will take you, for example, through all the provisions and the procedures under the Rotterdam Convention. We also have a YouTube channel where some of these resources are hosted. And last but not least, WCO has also specific courses on the BRS conventions, more geared towards the customs implementation and enforcement aspects. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I leave you my email address in case you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Melissa, for this great overview and sharing all these updates in regards to the work of the Secretariat in connection with the HS. I think it's very helpful to stay updated, and I hope our participants take note of the deadlines that you've mentioned earlier. Once again, thank you very much. And with this, I'm happy to hand over to Mr. Daniel Cardozo, who is an international trade expert, and he is also a chemical engineer, so he's familiar with the 2 things at the same time, with the HS system, with the customs, and also with the POPs. And with that, I'm very happy to hand over to Daniel for the more technical part of this presentation. Thank you very much, Melissa, and over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share my screen. Just let me know if the screen is okay.
Yes, it works. Thank you.
Okay. So, well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you, depending on the time zone that you are around the world. For me, it's 6 in the morning. I would like to thank the organizers for this invitation to speak about the POPs and the problems related to their control during international trade. So we have a lot to speak. So without further ado, let's start. as Melissa already presented an overview of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, I will focus only on the import and export provision of the convention. So I will speak about on how the chemicals could be identified by non-chemists, introducing a few chemical identifiers used during trade, including the harmonized system. For those who are not custom officers, I will briefly explain what the harmonized system is. And once we know the chemical identifiers and the HS, I will introduce the chemicals control under the Stockholm and Rotterdam Conventions and the articles that may contain these chemicals. On the slides, you will receive information for your future reference about the chemicals and their preparations, their HS codes, and some databases for consulting the chemical properties and the HS codes if you have access to internet. And I will refer to how these chemicals are controlled by customs and the importance of opening national HS codes to improve the control of legal trade and to detect illegal trade. I will talk about, if we have some time, about common smuggling methods used to disguise illegal trade. And we will see how real cases of illegal trade are. And lastly, once again, if we have time, I will comment on the importance of the cooperation between customs, national authorities, and focal points. Basically, let's start with a quick overview of the import and export procedures for the Rotterdam, Stockholm, and Basel Convention. So the big procedure works as details on the slide. For each chemical listed in Annex 3 to the convention, and therefore subject to the PIC procedure, there is a decision guidance document, which is prepared and sent to all parties. This is intended to help governments to assess their risk concerned with the handling, international trade, and use of the chemicals, so they can make more informed decisions as to whether they will allow future import of each of these chemicals contained in Annex 3. So the countries inform the Secretariat about the decision to import of these chemicals. These decision documents are available in the convention website at the link which is provided. And these import decisions, known as import responses, are published by the Secretariat and make it available to all parties. This way, parties are, let's say, informed about prior to any import or export, as whether or not an import has been consented or not. The link to these import responses databases is available on the web page of the Rotterdam Convention. Now, what is expected, the expected role of customs and designated national authorities for export? First of all, they should identify whether the chemical is listed in Annex 3 to the Rotterdam Convention. They should verify the HS codes declared for the chemicals if they are included, if they are well and correctly included in the shipping documents. If the chemical is listed in Annex 3, the relevant import decision of the importing country should be checked. If the exported chemical is banned or severely restricted in the country, an export notification must be provided and must be also checked. For imports, they should also verify the customs officers whether there is a chemical listed in Annex 3. So they need to keep up to date on the government on the chemicals by checking the Rotterdam Convention website. They should verify whether the chemical is labeled and accompanied by information. If an export notification is needed, they should check whether it has been provided. This must be confirmed with the designated national authority. Normally, there is a safety data sheet which accompany the chemical if it's used for occupational purposes. And for any doubts, they should contact the designated national authority for further information. In regard to the Stockholm Convention, although the convention regulates the import and export of these listed POPs, There's no specific procedure defined under the Stockholm Convention for the trade of the POPs, nor there is a definition of import and export as in the Rotterdam or Basel Convention. And therefore, there could be different interpretation of import and export depending on the legislation of the countries. When the POPs are also controlled by the Basel or Rotterdam Convention, then the control procedures provided by these conventions apply to the import and transit and export as appropriate to the POPs within the scope of those conventions. And what is important to know is that the convention regulates the export and import of intentionally produced POPs only. That is, the ones listed in Annexes A and B to the convention. The import and export provisions are the following. For imports, the chemicals listed in Annex A and B can only be imported for the purposes of environmental sound disposal, as set forth in Article 6, paragraph 1D, and for a use or purpose which is permitted for that party under Annex A or Annex B. So this provision adds some complexity to understanding which POPs can be imported or exported internationally. So you need to look at what are the purposes which are permitted for that party. All other imports and exports are prohibited. And for export, basically chemical for which safer alternatives are not readily available to all countries and for which there is a specific exemption or acceptable purpose can only be exported for environmental sound disposal or to a party which is permitted to use that chemical under Annexes A or B, or to a non-party to the convention which has provided an annual certification to the exporting party. Parties to the Stockholm Convention may register for specific exemption or for acceptable purposes for the production or use of a POP listed in Annex A or Annex B. This is done by informing the Secretariat of the Stockholm Convention, and the register of specific exemptions or acceptable purposes are available on the convention website as shown on this slide. It is important to remember that import and export requirements do not apply to quantities of chemicals to be used for laboratory research or as reference standards, nor to quantities or of specific chemicals occurring as unintentional trace contaminants in products and articles. These are two examples of the decisions to make about the import and export of two substances controlled by both Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. For instance, the import of Dechlorine Plus. Basically, you need to control if it's, let's say, in the list of the Rotterdam. If yes, is subject to the PIC procedure. If not, you need to look for specific exemptions for the use registered by importing party. And it's no specific exemption. Therefore, you have to take measures to restrict import for purposes of environmentally sound disposal under Article 6. And if there are specific exceptions, you need to take measures to restrict this import in accordance with the provisions of Part 11 of Annex A, or let's say for environmentally sound disposal. For the Basel Convention, to make certain that the conditions and requirements described in the conventions are met, and that the state has the information it needs to make an informed decision about permitting an import, export, or transit shipment. The Basel Convention has established a notification and consent procedures. Basically, the exporter or generator of the waste and the disposer sign a contract that specified that the waste will be disposed of in an environmental sound manner. Both exporter and generator and the disposer inform to their national authorities, let's say, about this contract. The state of export then informs the state of import and the state of transit about the proposed movement, hazardous waste, and other waste by means of a notification document that should travel with the cargo. And this document should contain the information set out in Annex 5A to the Basel Convention, and it should be controlled by customs. The state of import sends to the state of export the consent or the denied of the movement. It can also request for further information. And therefore, basically upon receipt of the consent of the import and transit countries for the transboundary movement, the state of export permits the movement, and the waste are accompanied through the entire shipment by a movement document. And the information to be included in the movement document is listed in Annex 5B to the Basel Convention. Okay, the second document that should be controlled by customs. If in the movement is used equipment, there should be a third document that provides proof that the equipment is working or that it will be repaired. These slides show you the templates for the notification and movement documents containing the information requested or required under Annexes 5A and B to the Basel Convention. So for more information, you can refer to the websites. There is also you can refer to the Green Custom Guide or to multilateral environmental agreements that is dedicated to customs. Okay, so the important thing is, so far I have mentioned the import and export procedures of the chemicals listed in different annexes to the conventions without specifically mentioning the chemicals. But it's a fact that to control transfers, to enforce the import and export provisions, and to collect data, the chemicals should be identified by customs. So at the same time, the proper identification and the classification of the chemicals into the harmonized system by customs determine whether the PIC procedure and other procedures must be followed and if the transboundary movement is allowed. So how to identify these chemicals? For those who are not chemists, the chemicals are difficult to be identified. We need to find convenient identifiers for the proper identification of a chemical during international trade. Could be packaging one of the identifiers. Well, the chemical could be packaged in many different ways, in containers, in drums, in tanks. So packaging may not be a good identifier. That's because packaging may change depending on factors such as the quantity, if it's traded in bulk or in separate containers. What about the physical appearances? For instance, you can see on the slide different liquid pesticides. They all look the same. They are all yellowish liquids. If we compare chlorpyrifos and cypermethrin physical appearances, both circling in red on the slide, they look more or less the same. So, and cypermethrin is not controlled. So physical appearance also is not very good for identify the chemical. But of course, it's always possible to take some samples and send the chemical for analysis at any lab. Or sometimes it's possible to analyze on-site if you have portable equipment, but this has a cost. It may cost delays opening the containers and waiting for the final result of the analysis. You need appropriate equipment and expertise. And there is a saying that time is money, but this saying is more applicable to the cargo in port. The more the cargo stays at the port, the more money they pay in the premises of the port. So basically, a sample sampling and analysis can only be performed only in cases that you suspect that something is happening on an occasional random basis. So it's not possible to sample every chemical product being imported or exported, as there are no enough resources available in customs. And the vast majority of the chemicals are transferred for legitimate purposes, and therefore during legal trade, the identity won't be concealed. And therefore, on a routine basis, they say that custom officers need to use chemical identifiers to try to identify these controlled chemicals with the information that is available on the custom documents. One chemical identifier is the chemical name. Chemicals are named according to different systematic nomenclatures. The standard systematic nomenclature is the IUPAC chemical name. But although systematic is a very complex, long name, many names and synonyms for the same chemical. For example, let's say ethanol or ethyl alcohol, both refer to the same chemical, both accepted by IUPAC. So to make things worse, chemicals have some trade names given by their producers. On the slide, you can see that the IUPAC name and many trade names for altering. So it is clear that it's not easy to remember all of these names. There is a unique chemical identifier for some pesticides, which is the ISO name for trade registration, legislative purposes, and for scientific publications. Pesticides are assigned agreed names that are short, distinctive, non-proprietary, and is widely accepted. These ISO names are assigned by the International Organization for Standardization, which has assigned more than 1,200 of these ISO common names for pesticides in different languages. For instance, for ISO for the chemical with the IUPAC name that you see in red is aldrin. In English, aldrina. In Spanish, aldrin. In French, aldrin also is in Russian. And in the annexes of the Stockholm and Rotterdam Convention, pesticides are named according to their ISO names. I have included a link to the compendium of pesticide common names for your information if you need to look for the ISO name of some pesticides. It is true that for chemists, the chemical structure is a unique identifier, but however, for non-chemists, it is difficult to remember that the chemical structure of this on this slide is the chemical structure of aldrin. So the chemical structure is not easily searchable and is not normally included in the customs clearance documents. But it's normally included in the technical information and in the material safety data sheet. Another chemical identifier is the molecular formula, which gives the number of each type of atoms in a molecule, but provides no information on how these atoms are connected between them. And therefore, many different chemicals have the same molecular formula. So its utility is limited for identification purposes. So a unique chemical identifier is the CAS number. This is a numerical identifier assigned to a specific chemical substance by the Chemical Abstracts Service, which is part of the American Chemical Society, which maintains a database of chemical compounds and sequences. The CAS database currently contains over 290 million substances. And the CAS number helps to eliminate this confusion caused by having different chemical names for the same chemical by providing a single and ambiguous and numerical identifier. These CAS numbers are essential for accurate communication, for regulatory compliance, and research in and related fields. However, some preparations containing the control chemical may not have a CAS number. So the format of this CAS number is 10 digits long, using the format of up to 7 digits, a dash, 2 digits, a dash, and 1 control digit. All POPs and PIC chemicals have assigned CAS numbers. And for some customs administration, it is mandatory to declare the CAS number of a chemical substance during the import and export operation. Another useful identifier is the UN number, which is used to identify dangerous goods during transportation. The UN number identifies always hazardous chemicals. And some hazardous substances have their own UN number. For instance, hexachlorobutadiene has the UN number 2279, while other numbers sometimes refer to a group of chemicals which pose similar hazard properties. For instance, aldrin shares the UN number 2762, which groups organochlorine pesticides, which are liquid and flammable and toxic. So you can find the UN numbers in the packaging, on labels and placards of the containers, trucks, or other means of transport. If you see a UN number, the chemical is hazardous, so the UN number could help you to identify the hazardous chemicals during import and export, looking at the technical information and the package. The UN number for major transported containers could be found in the transport of dangerous goods model, or in the packaging of the chemical substance in accordance to the UN globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals. You can access this number through the link I have provided in the slide. There are other chemical identifiers such as SMILE or INCI, which are used by chemists for the identification of chemical structures, but they are not frequently used by industry or traders. These identifiers could be introduced in a software to reproduce the chemical structure of the compound. Where can you find these identifiers? Well, you can find this, the CAS number, chemical formula, ISO name, UN numbers on the material safety data sheets, technical information, and packaging and labels of the products. Remember that the safety data sheet could be requested during trade. It can provide useful information on the chemical composition to help you to identify the chemical that is being transported. But the critical identifier used during customs operation is the Harmonized System Code, or in short, the HS codes, which identify any traded good, including chemicals, during custom procedures, and it is included in the customs and transportation documents. So let's see now what the International Convention of the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System is, or in short, the harmonized system. Basically, the classic role of customs since the beginning of time has been the collection of duties. So tariffs has been probably in existence for as long as government exists. So the earlier tariffs were simply a list of goods and the applicable tariff. Just to show you how old the customs profession is, you can see on the slide a papyrus with an Egyptian custom tariff dating back 2000 years before Christ. So given the complexity of the goods which are traded today, it is necessary now to have a systematic nomenclature which is able to include the different type of goods which are traded today, including chemicals. And this systematic nomenclature is the harmonized system nomenclature. This, the latest version is the 2022 version, but it is updated in general, 5 years, except this year, this time that because of the pandemic, has to be updated after 6 years. So basically, The harmonized system is a multi-purpose nomenclature for traded goods developed by the World Customs Organization. It is the annex to this convention. And as any convention has contracting parties, as of today, there are 163 contracting parties to the HS Convention, 162 countries and the European Union, which is used as a basis for custom tariffs and trade statistics by 212 countries and economic unions around the world, meaning that more than 98% of the world trade is done using the harmonized system. And basically, is the universal economic language for trade that transforms the concept of a good or substance into a 6-digit code. So the advantages are evident. Pineapple in English, ananá or piña in Spanish, abacaxi in Portuguese, or whatever is pronounced in Chinese or Korean, is understood by all customs in the world by its HS code, which is 080430, despite language differences. So it is a numeric code that could be understood and processed by computers. And because the harmonized system has well drafted in accordance with its object and purpose, it is used not only for custom tariffs, but it's also for many other purposes, such as basically the collection of international trade statistics as a basis for the rules of origin, for the collection of national taxes, like in Brazil, and for the trade negotiations. The World Trade Organization schedule of tariff concessions and free trade agreements are done by using the harmonized system. It's also used during transport and statistic in transport, and is used for monitoring controlled goods, waste, hazardous chemicals, narcotics, chemical weapons, substances, ozone depleting substances, and endangered species. And it's used as a vital element of core custom processes, areas in custom control, and the procedures, including the risk assessment, in the custom software, etc. So the harmonized system is not a list of all traded goods, but is all traded goods can be classified using the HS nomenclature. And this nomenclature groups all the commodities, all the traded commodities in 21 sections, 97 chapters, 1,228 4-digit called headings, and 5,612 6-digit subheadings in this 2022 version. The classification at heading or subheading level is performed by using 6 classification rules, which are called general interpretative rules, and also legal notes, which contain some definition called section, chapter, or subheading notes. The countries and region agreements have the obligation to use the same 6 digits. At the regional or national level, they can add more digits to identify specific national or regional trade, provided that the 6 first digits are the same. For example, at international level, subheading 290382 identifies aldrin, chlordane, and heptachlor. At international level, this subheading groups 3 chemicals. So basically, the United States, which use 10 digits in its national nomenclature, under the obligation to use the same 6 initial digits, they decided to add 4 zeros to complete the 10 digits. The European Union at regional level use 8 digits, so the region decided to add 2 more zeros for this regional, let's say, subheading. But let's say Mercosur, who groups Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay between other countries, decided to follow a different approach. At regional level, they kept the 6 digits but the region decided to open specific regional subheadings to assign aldrin, chlordane, and heptachlor specific regional subheadings. And Uruguay, which is a member of Mercosur, uses 10 digits. So for their national subheadings, they added 2 zeros to each of the regional subheadings. So this is a partial view of the table of contents of the nomenclature. You can see that section 1 has 5 chapters that cover live animals and animal products. Section 2 cover vegetable products. And section 6, which contains products of the chemical sector, is the one that is more relevant for the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions. There are other sections that may cover products containing substances controlled under the conventions, such as plastics, textiles, electrical equipment, etc. So for the substances controlled under the Rotterdam and the Stockholm Conventions are classified in Chapter 29. So the pure substances and the pesticide preparations containing POPs. There are no pesticides, and some waste are very often classified in Chapter 38. I will show you some examples of the classification of pure substances controlled by Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, classified in Chapter 29. So let's put as an example the heading 2910. The first 2 digits indicate the chapter number, which is Chapter 29. The third and fourth digit indicates the position of that heading. Heading 2910 is the 10th heading of the Chapter 29. And in that heading 2910, we have specific chemical oxidant, which is controlled by the Rotterdam Convention and therefore subject to the PIC procedure, which is classified in subheading 29.10.10. Endrin is controlled only by the Stockholm Convention, is classified in subheading 29.10.50, and the eldrin, which is controlled by both conventions, therefore subject again to the PIC procedure, is classified in subheading 29.10.40. So here you have several chemicals covered by specific subheadings which are controlled either by one or both the Stockholm or the Rotterdam Conventions. You can note that there are subheadings covering only one chemical, which is preferable. There are subheadings which are covering more than one chemical, such as heading 290382, which cover 3 chemicals, aldrin, chlordane, and heptachlor. And there are subheadings, what we call baskets, called other, covering all the other chemicals which are not specifically named or mentioned before. So the subheading 290399, for instance, other, covers polychlorinated naphthalines and PCBs. So, and this is because we have other, because with 6-digit codes used at international level, it's not always possible to cover specifically all chemicals. There are millions of chemicals. There are many international conventions. So sometimes due to the lack of these free subheadings, some chemicals should have to be grouped together. In those cases, opening subheadings should be done at regional or national subheadings, okay? Pesticide preparations are covered in heading 3808. Once again, due to the lack of enough free 6-digit subheadings, many pesticide preparations containing substances controlled by Rotterdam and Stockholm are grouped together in the subheading note 1. So in heading 3808, all pesticide preparations containing the substance mentioned in subheading note 1 are classified in subheading 3808.52 or 3808.59. Please note that all pesticides containing the substances mentioned in this subheading note 1 are controlled by Rotterdam and therefore subject to the PIC procedure. You know that new pesticides are always included periodically in Annex 2, but if they are not mentioned in subheading note 1, such as the terbufos and 4-8, these are therefore classified in subheading note 30, in subheading 380891, for example. So the pesticides which are not mentioned in subheading note 1, some controlled by the Stockholm Convention, may be classified in subheading 380891 or 99 in the HS 2022 version. And every amendment to the nomenclature, the Basel Convention and the Rotterdam Convention in general request new substances to be added to subheading note 1. And the Rotterdam Convention requested that in the next version, the 2022 version, terbufos and 4-8 be added in subheading note 1. So there are other preparations that are not pesticides but contain substances controlled by either Rotterdam or Stockholm, which are included in a subheading note 3 to chapter 38. These preparations contain certain controlled chemicals, are classified in heading 3824. Okay. Once again, preparations containing substances not mentioned in subheading note 3, such as Decloran Plus or Dicofol, are classified in subheading 3824 99 other in the HS 2022. The subheadings highlighted in green are preparations containing substances controlled by both Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions and therefore subject to the PIC procedure. And the preparations highlighted in blue are controlled only by Rotterdam, but also subject to the PIC procedure. So in 2028, we will have a new version of the harmonized system, a new nomenclature, and due to a request by Rotterdam Convention, new substances will be added to have specific subheadings such as 4-8, terbufos, trichlorphone, decabromo-diphenyl ether, hexabromo, cyclododecanes, and these substances will be subject to the PIC procedure. In 2028, the pesticides containing 4-8 and terbufos will be added to subheading note 1, as I told you, and these preparations will be classified in subheading 380859. For those preparations containing, which are not pesticides, in 2028, there are some chemicals that will be added, such as perfluorooctanoic acids and their salts, decabromo-diphenyl ether, cyclododecanes, which will be specifically added in heading 3824. Now, so far I have been mentioning a series of control chemicals and some HS codes. In the following slides, you have for your reference the complete list of substances and their preparations controlled under the Rotterdam-Stockholm Convention and their HS codes. Some substances will change their HS codes when in 2028 amendments to the HS enter into force. These codes are highlighted in red. You will receive this list together with this presentation after this workshop. So here you have, in the next slide, you have a list of pesticides. There are preparations and industrial chemical substances controlled by the Rotterdam Convention. In the first column, you have the ISO name. In the second column, the CAS number. The third column, the HS 2022 code of the pure substance. And in the fourth column, the HS code of the preparations containing the substance. Remember that the pesticide preparations are classified in heading 3808, and other preparations which are not pesticide are classified in heading 3824. The list shows future changes in 2028 in red, and when all the row is highlighted in red, means that the substance is controlled by both Rotterdam and Stockholm Convention, and therefore the substance is subject also to the peak procedure. 2 asterisks in the cast number means that only the cast number of the parent compound is listed. For example, pentachlorophenol and its salts and esters, only the cast number of the pentachlorophenol was listed because their salt and ester could be an open-ended situation. So here you have a list of the substances controlled and their preparations controlled under the Rotterdam Convention. The same list shows substances and preparations controlled under the Rotterdam Convention contained in the annexes A, B, and C. Once again, the same meaning with the colors. Here you have all the substances. Be aware that the substances are always being added, and you will need to update this list periodically, but as of today, this is the most updated list of chemicals controlled by both conventions that you are getting today. There are some limitations to the HS codes as unique identifiers. Although the HS codes are very useful for trade control, they have certain limitations as we have many chemicals controlled by many multilateral agreements. Sometimes there are not enough 6-digit codes to identify each chemical separately at international level. And some chemicals fall under generic HS codes called other. If there are 3 6-digit left, new codes are assigned to specific or shared substances in each amendment at the request of international organizations. For example, the Rotterdam Convention requested the WCO to assign a new specific HS subheading 290384 for hexabromocyclododecanes in the next 2028 amendment. So as the new amendments will enter into force every 5 years, the next one will enter into force in 2028. That means that countries have to wait until 2028 to have a specific HS codes. And the answer is no. To identify a substance which is not specifically mentioned today at 6-digit level, basically the region or the country would open a specific national or regional subheading for such substance to identify the substance, using as many digits as the one used in national regional subheadings. For example, the European Union uses at regional level 8 digits, and the EU has identified hexabromocyclododecanes at regional level by expanding the international subheading 290389 other to a regional 8-digit subheading 29038920, opening a specific regional subheading for hexabromocyclododecane. So it is not necessary to wait until 2028 to open specific subheadings at national or regional level. So countries have the possibility to open national subheadings to control chemicals at any time without depending on the long discussions at the WCO and the 5-year amendment cycles. And to help countries or regions to open specific national subheadings for the substances control, the WCO issued a recommendation to countries to open specific national subheadings for the chemicals shown on the slide. So this chemical at international level didn't have a specific subheading due to the lack of 3 6 digits. But again, the problem could be solved at national level, where countries have more digits and more possibilities to open national subheadings. There are several useful sources of information you can consult that I would like to recommend to you. From the list of controlled chemicals that you will receive, you can look at the cast number of the substance with the CAS number, using these sources of information, you can have access to chemical information, to information on HS codes, and to how these hazardous substances are labeled. And if an accident or spill happen, you can consult how to deal with that, and you can look at the registration of the substances using these sources of information on that I provided to you. For instance, the first database is the ChemSpider. You can search the database by using the CAS number of the substance. You can have information, chemical information such as the chemical structures, molecular formula, chemical names and synonyms, properties, vendors of the substance, and spectra for analysis. The same information, you can have it in the second database that I'm recommended, the PubChem, which is part of the National Library of Medicine in the US. You can also, don't rule out Wikipedia. It contains chemical information and uses of the substance, different identifiers, such as CAS number, UN numbers, INCI, etc. Through the link provided, you can download the Emergency Response Guidebook. With the UN number, you can have an idea about the hazardous substance expecting a container having UN 2279. You can find that the number belongs to hexachlorobutadiene, which is a substance controlled by the Stockholm Convention. And in the list provided, you can see that the HS codes that you should be declared. In case of a leaking container, you can read that for this UN number, you have a guide 151, which advise you how to proceed in cases of a spill or leak, and the safety precautions that you must follow. This is the database that I would like to recommend to all of you. The European Customs Inventory of Chemical Substance database. This is the database that you should consult for HS codes of controlled chemicals. Is used by custom chemists in the European Union. This database contains around 50,000 chemical names in 11 EU languages. So it is possible to search the database using the CAS number to identify the chemical product. And this database contains all pesticides listed by ISO, all ozone depleting substances, all chemical subject to peak procedure, and other substances subject to import and export control by the EU. And it's the only place that you can have access to the classification of the chemical at EU level. But remember that the first 6 digits should be the same for each country. And in the database, you also have a link to the ECHA database, which is the European Chemical Agency, when you have also technical information on possible hazard classification and labeling, and more chemical information of the controlled substances. Here I also included a link to the website that you can search for safety data sheets. So now, many multilateral environmental agreements requested the WCO open specific HS codes for their substances, but how these HS codes are used to facilitate the monitoring and control of trade in controlled substances. Well, basically, this is a pool custom officer based at the border, port, or airport. Its basic function is to control the payment of tariffs in accordance with the national regulations, regional agreements. This pool custom officer should control the payment of VAT and other taxes according to tax regulations.
Where did you
And
fly
give it the
from?
different, sorry?
Yeah.
Sorry. It's okay? Can you listen to me? Okay. Given the different kind of goods imported, he has to control the products that are not fake. And this poor custom officer, which is not a chemist, he also faces with the control of multilateral environmental agreements, endangered species, with the control of narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances that could be used to produce chemical weapons, to produce biological weapons, with 14 chemicals that could be used to produce improvised explosive devices. Many countries belong to other ad hoc groups, such as the Australia group or the Wassenaar dual use group. The poor guy should also control technology, equipment, so it's not used to produce weapons. So do you think that this custom officer, which is not a chemist, is able to control all of this? He cannot remember. We should agree that is really difficult for a custom officer to control all of this. But however, customs are tasked to control all of these conventions. So what is the solution? The solution is to control the chemical substances, is to use the custom software as a tool. So this custom software should be customized to include all these substances that a human being is not able to remember. This ideal software basically is connected with all the ministries in real time, with the Ministry of Environment, with the office who issue licenses, with the ports, even with the national authorities in charge of the MEAS. It should be connected in real time. And this, what the system does, basically when import and export is requested, is with the HS code to look for the license and look that the license has been issued. It could also control that all the procedures are in place, basically to issue a custom permit to import and export. So this is the first phase of the custom software. The weakness of this software is that it bases control on the HS codes. So, and the importer or exporter basically can misdeclare this the code, and this is why there is a second step, basically, which when the goods arrive at the port, then in the second phase, the software helps to decide with a risk assessment whether the importer declaration should be trusted, whether the good will be for inspection or for immediately released, facilitating or speeding up the trade. This is known as basically channeling the clearance, assigning green channel for immediate release, yellow channel for the inspection of the documents, or red channel for physical inspection. And the system can only decide whether a sample has to be taken. There is depends on the software, can assign a blue channel to inspect the goods at the premises of the company. And this risk assessment, basically, the system weighs several risk indicators, is controlled by an international convention, could it be a SARDUS, etc. It's based on certain parameters, okay? Once again, for your reference, I listed all the chemicals controlled under the Stockholm Rotterdam Conventions and their uses for your reference. I'm not going to go one by one, but basically I put a summary of the products that may contain controlled substances. We have meat and fish due to contamination, vegetable crops, section 2. There are products that may contain flame retardants, such as textiles, leather, section 8, paper, plastics, ABS, for instance, subheading 390330, polystyrene expanded, subheading 390311, polyurethane foams, polyamides, PVC, firefighting foams, construction materials, oils. So I put all the possible HS codes and headings and subheadings that of products that may contain controlled substances here, okay? And you have certain waste, e-waste, waste oils, municipal waste that may contain controlled substances. So at this stage, I have to warn you that not that we have seen the products that may contain controlled substances. I have to tell you that the HS codes have certain limitations in respect to the control of these products during import and export. HS codes are useful for monitoring trade in chemical substances and preparations, but certain are classified based on their function and not on the composition, such as a chair, which is a seat. So a metallic seat, a plastic seat, a wooden seat are classified as seats in the harmonized system, regardless of the material that the seat is made of. However, there are some specific subheadings for seats made of certain materials or for a particular use. For instance, we have HS code for seats of a kind used for motor vehicles. So the plastic materials are also classified according to the polymer content, but not according to the additive content. And therefore, it is very difficult to know whether a polyurethane foam contains a prohibited flame retardant unless an analysis is made. Electric or electronic products are classified according to their function. A computer or TV with a metal or plastic housing containing additives are classified as a computer or TV regardless of the housing materials. There are, however, certain HS codes, PCBs, PCTs, or PVBs, but the fact is that the additive content of a product is more a production problem than a trade problem. The HS was not made for controlling how the product was produced, but in fact, the products should not be produced with certain prohibited substances in the first place, okay? So the control should be placed first in the production side and not on the trade side as a recommendation. In most cases, the HS code of product won't give you the information of the additives. So you will need to carry out an analysis to know the additive content or consult with the producer. For instance, you have here a few wastes that indeed mention the content of PCBs, PCTs, and PVBs, such as waste oil of subheading 271091. But as you can see, for polymers such as expansible polyester or polyurethanes, there is no mentioning on the additive content in the HS. The preparation for fire extinguisher of heading 3813 also do not mention the additive content. The Basel Convention in Annex 8 mentioned the entry 83180, which are waste substances or articles containing or contaminated with PCB, PCTs, PVBs at a concentration level of 50 milligrams per kilograms or more. These kind of articles or products may contain these substances are listed on the left side, okay? But many of these substances or articles can be mixed with, let's say, other wastes, such as municipal waste, clinical or other waste classified in heading 3825. So these are wastes requiring special consideration. So the concentration level when the waste starts to be hazardous can only be proven with a chemical analysis, not by the HS codes. Okay. Basically, there is an example of an issue of POPs in e-waste. Basically, brominated flame retardant has been extensively used in electric components and electrical equipment, and therefore the electric and the e-waste which are classified in heading 8549 may contain POPs. Some of these subheadings, as you can see, 854931 reference PCBs, for instance. Mm-hmm. But they can have PFOs, PCBs, etc. Mm-hmm. Frame retardants. But basically here, I put a diagram involving the production, use, disposal in a country, the international trade, basically production and use and elimination of Annex A and B or restriction in Annex B. This is covered in Article 3 of the Stockholm Convention. Import and export also is covered in Annex 3, but in the custom port, you only have hours to make a decision. In the country, you have several months to make a decision whether a product contains a POP. Okay, so custom doesn't have much time to control here. So it is better to control the production side, the use side, than the control the trade side on additives. So once the documents have been, let's say, analyzed, you may want to compare that an illegal, when a cargo involving a chemical waste arrives at the port, the custom officer basically first the custom documents, making sense and corresponding to the declared products during an import and export. They look for all the information. And if the declaration looks suspicious, the custom officer may want to carry out a physical inspection. But this is strongly recommended, let's say, if they want to open a container and perform a visual inspection, only to do it in dedicated inspection areas with the proper equipment, with personal protection equipment and offload facilities. Normally, these premises are located in the ports or in the airports, but if it's necessary to inspect cargo alongside a road, it is necessary to consider whether it is safe for the officer or others and the environment to open a container. So I know that customs officers are eager to discover illegal movements, but they should have some health and safety precautions, avoiding detection of hazardous substances by using smell, taste, or other senses. They should use appropriate equipment. They should not take any action unless they have done an appropriate assessment of the situation. They should not open drums, trailer trucks, or enter confined spaces without an appropriate equipment and without an appropriate assessment of the situation. In case they find something, they should not destroy evidence, as they have to go to the court. And of course, to open the container, it is necessary to use the appropriate personal protective equipment and to have adequate sampling equipment. Okay. To confirm, after the visual inspection, they should review whether they have basically they can have send the goods for analysis, but the sampling methods, the analysis should be done by accredited laboratories and by established methods, because this could be challenged by the importer. And basically, after the study of the trade documents and the physical inspection, you can have two conclusions. Either the physical movement is legal or the physical movement is illegal. Okay. As the Stockholm and Rotterdam Conventions do not explicitly define illegal trade, national laws and the legislation define what what, let's say, control chemical is an illegal trade or not. So, pending the outcome of an investigation, the shipment may be detained in order to avoid further transportation of the suspicious cargo into the country. Detaining the container has financial consequences and may be seen as disrupting legitimate trade. And it is more important that the various stakeholders concerned, the exporter, the custom broker, be informed about this action by issuing, let's say, a stop notice, okay? There are some smuggling schemes. Basically, some waste could be declared as second-hand goods. Hazardous waste could be declared as not hazardous. Here you have some examples of real cases of misdeclarations of controlled products. Basically, e-waste and waste refrigerators containing CFCs declared as second-hand goods. Mixed household residues declared as paper or plastic waste, or PCB containing transformers classified as metal scrap, and hazardous chemicals declared as not hazardous. The concealment methods basically could be using a cover load, placing the illegal goods behind legal goods in the containers or under layers of illegal goods. This is detected by the X-ray machines in the ports. In these slides, you can see, I don't know if you can see the X-ray photos of the container, but it clearly shows that washing machines and microwaves are stacked without protection, and in front of the door, there is another type of good blocking the visual. Electric and electronic equipment stacked without protection is an indication of illegal movements. Basically, mixing hazardous waste with not hazardous waste is another modality, okay? So I'm going to stop here because we are running out of time, but let me show you just example of some risk indicators that could be used to detect whether a cargo could be revised. And there are some HS codes which have high risk codes, which are the codes which do not trigger a peak procedure. So for instance, in this example, we have high risk subheadings for the new plastic waste subheadings that will be implemented in 2028. We have new subheadings which trigger a peak procedure, which are highlighted in red, and some HS code, mostly for recycling purposes, that won't trigger a peak procedure. So naturally, nobody trying to bring an illegal trade of hazardous plastic waste will declare something that triggered a peak procedure. So those subheadings which are not covered by the peak procedure should be a high risk HS code. Okay. So I'm not going to go through this real case scenario because we have our colleagues from Lao that will talk about some hazardous chemicals and some real cases. So I'm going to stop here, stop share my presentation to allow our colleagues to show real cases.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for guiding us through all this nitty-gritty of the POPs and the HS codes, and also this very helpful information on the key identifiers that could be referred to during the border control. I see that we still have on the panel our colleagues from Lao PDR that work on another GEF-funded project, GEF Farm, Mr. Fumi Kanya and Mr. Saitong Pengbuva. If you are with us still, we would like to give the floor to you. They are coming from the Department of Agriculture of the Lao PTR, and we'll be very happy to hear about your case in your country.
Don't worry, your courses. Okay, thank you, sir. So I would like to introduce my name. So my name is Pumi Kanya, the farm project assistant. So I would like to present on the preventing illegal importation of highly hazardous pesticide in Laos for share the experience from the GEF fund in Laos. His next for my content is about 7 topic. So could you please to next slide. Okay, for the agriculture and livelihoods in Laos. Laos is a landlocked country. We have the border within Thailand, Vietnam, China, Cambodia, and Myanmar. So on mostly the population about 77% should be produced on the agriculture, and the vegetable crop is products in domestic market and export to overseas. For the current challenge is we have the season limited on produce the vegetable during the rainy season. We have problem in this. For the market access don't have meet the market demand and support from the fresh vegetable, and most of the farmer produce on the small scale operation because we have the fresh high product and labor cost. For the issue of comprehensive is in the local vegetable more expensive and less comprehensive, and after that we have the challenge on the import from the neighboring country, and the market access is for the farmer in Laos they don't have the to know about the market information, and many vegetable is really still import from other country, from Thailand and China. Can you please the next slide? For the situation on the pesticide use illegal and control in the Laos we have the 4 point to explain about in the current practice in the farmer can be used only highly hazardous pesticide, and they don't know how to protect when the farmer need to use on the highly hazardous pesticide. They don't use on the PPE, and sometimes they don't know about the pesticide ban such as the paraquat and metamil. 2 types of the pesticide we found a lot of in Laos on the paraquat and metamil. For the pesticide source in Laos, I would like to explain on this point. In Laos we don't have produce on the active ingredient and the pesticide formulation. For selling in Laos we have import from the Thailand and the China, and later than in Vietnam. For the regulation and technical challenges in our country we lack of the technical technology and the safety and disposal on the highly hazardous pesticide, and the confiscation and enforcement of the illegal pesticide is very difficult to proper disposal system. For example, the pesticide and plastic waste. And the last one is we need to support from the regional cooperation for cooperate with the neighboring country and the manufacturing countries is essential, and joint effort in needs to protect the community from toxic chemical and strength enforce national pesticide law. Next slide. Next slide, sir. Next slide, please. Can you hear me? Okay, thank you. For this key challenges we have the 4 challenges. The first is I explained in the last slide. In Laos is have share the border with many countries, and so we have the difficulty and issue to manage on the control the illegal pesticide and illegal import pesticide from other country in Laos. So, and the second is for the classification of highly hazardous is could be identified from the authority from agriculture and the customer, because in this point is the customer is they in Laos is some person is they don't understand, they cannot to identify and discount on the highly hazardous code now. And we want to exchange and coordinate with the experience between the other partner and agriculture and customer in the border. Second point is have still a limit on the knowledge, and this one is in our country is a lack of the technology for destroy to manage on disposal of high hazardous of pesticide. For example, in the pesticide and plastic waste, we cannot to dispose, and we don't have the technology and the knowledge to control and manage on this point. Please, next slide. For the farm project practice and experience in 2005, we focus it on 4 topics. For the farm project, can be support the government policy and enforcement, especially in the law, agriculture law, and related on the pesticide. And the second is the farm project is support on the knowledge and the technical capacity building in the agriculture and the custom officer to join inspect and mechanisms in the border checkpoint, and to manage and enforcement in illegal pesticide management. And third is farm should be support the training program to the authority in the border, how to know about the highly hazardous of pesticide identification and how to manage on this the HSP. And the last one is we have the awareness campaign and support the training to the authority and the farmer how to know about on the IPM and the GAP for reduce on the pesticide using in the farm and sustainable and environment friendly agriculture economic system. Please, next slide. For the lesson learned is we have the 6 points. First is we support on the awareness raising to the authority and the farmer, and we have the regulation practice and according to the harmonized system code and system is really important for the control in the border, especially in the illegal pesticide import in the border checkpoint, and promoting in the clean agriculture practice and IPM integrated pest management to the farmer and the authority to know about the reduce on the pesticide when the farmer need to use the pesticide, how to use and how to protect themselves, and need to support and the enforcement law and regulation during in the border trade to stop on the illegal pesticide import and illegal smuggling. And after that we need to share and we need to learn about the original information to improve the enforcement and related to legal and regulatory. This slide, this next slide. And the last one is the way forward is we focus on the strengthen regional cooperation and knowledge and sharing in between is the other project to keep the GEF fund and to our to oversee to share the experiment. And the second is should be and support in the technical capacity building especially the highly hazardous identification and management on the highly hazardous of pesticide. And the third is provide the practical detection tool for the agriculture and the customer office, because it's very important. If we have the tool, we can be identify and resolve on this highly hazardous of the pesticide. And the last one is we need to support from the farm again to link in border enforcement within safer alternative in Laos. For my presentation is that's on for presenting. I thank you very much for your attention. If you have any comment or any question, you can discuss with our team. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our colleagues from the farm project in Lao. I'm just reading the comments on the chat at the moment. People are saying thanks for the insight. Seems to be the same issues in many developing countries. So I guess we share experience across the countries. And maybe if anyone from the team would like to add anything else, Bernard, or we can move to the Q&A directly. Bernard, do you want to add anything on your end? Okay, then if not, Daniel, would you like to comment or step in?
Not really much. Just to thank, for the opportunity, and also also to get from the expertise on how to so that we have a long-term solutions to some of these. I just mentioned that there are some of the challenges in most developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bernard. And Daniel, do you want to comment on the case, or do you want to add something? I know you have a few slides on the cooperation, and maybe we could link this in with the case in Laos.
I'm not sure if you want to, did I continue with some cases, or do you want me to answer some of the questions of the participants?
Yeah, we do have actually a few questions on the chat. So if that's okay, we could then move forward with the questions. So the first one was how to detect the chemicals when label doesn't provide enough information about the product. So this is subject to the labeling, and I guess it's this came from the Cameroon.
Well, this is part of the identification, of course. The response is a long response because basically, if you have a controlled substance from the exporting country, there should be, national cooperation between basically the national focal points, designated national authorities and competent authorities to try to identify in both countries, not only the importing, but also in the exporting country, and from the production side, whether a chemical, a restricted chemical has been added to a product of the pure chemical if it's a pure chemical, the answer is simple. Basically, if it's declared as such, it's easy to identify the chemical. But if it's contained within product, now this is a challenge. And again, I told that from the production side, there should be some kind of control to make sure that no controlled chemicals or POPs are added to product in the production part. So in each country have to inspect the production, not only the trade, but also the production side. So, and sharing all this information may allow, importing and exporting country to detect these cases. But also, yes, we can analyze the product. But I recently spoke that it's not possible to analyze all products. So it's not an easy answer to this question.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And I think a few questions that we had on the chat so far you addressed throughout your slides, but I will just read them through, and if you have anything else to add to these questions. So these were how to identify POPs used in manufacturing products. A similar question, how do we identify chemicals in articles such as flame retardants in the cars, which you also mentioned throughout your slides, I think. And yeah, these two, I think they're quite similar.
Yes, everybody seems to believe that it's possible with the HS codes. And I try to convey the difficulty of doing that using the HS code. With the HS codes, you can identify certain, let's say, goods that may contain, but the fact that they do contain is not a trade matter, it's a production matter. So either you identify this, let's say, if you import a POP, okay, the national authorities or the national focal points, they should trace the final use of this import. Is this going to be added to a product? They shouldn't be added. So it is something that has to be done in the country before it's going to be exported. And if the POP is produced in the country, then the authorities should make sure that this product is not included in any product. Or well, let's say there are products that could be included. You know, if we're talking about a medicine for lice or you know, malaria, okay, it's allowed. They can do it. But I have the feeling that everybody believes that it could be done during trade. And trade, you have few hours to detect this situation. While the product is the country, then you have more time to detect the situation.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Okay, I see that there is a very specific question to you on the chat. Do you have an equipment used by customs officers to identify in the chemicals in the products, like an XRF used for certain chemicals? So is it a practice, or is there any practice in the customs authorities to use some equipment at the border?
Yes, there are two type of equipment. The one which are, you know, the most exact equipment, which are in the labs. So you have to take a sample from the container and take it to the lab. Or you have portable equipment, which are less exact, I would say, but they have the advantage. They don't destroy the samples. It's like a gun. You aim at the product, just shoot, and they have a database of products. And if the product is within this database, it can detect the product. Okay. There is also a misunderstanding. I think that there was a comment that through the scanning of the container, they can only see shapes. They cannot detect chemical products. They can only, there is a misunderstanding that people believe that when you scan the container, you are able to analyze the content. No, you only see shapes. It's like a X-ray. You know, you can see the bones of the body, but you cannot see what is the content. You know, you can see the bones, but you cannot see that the bones are made of phosphorus or calcium or whatever. So you have to do it in the lab, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I know we are a bit behind the time, so for the sake of the time management, we will pick up the last question. I think that was about the CAS number database. So there were a few people who were interested how to check the CAS number and is there a database? I guess you mentioned that in the slides about the CAS numbers and where this can be checked.
Yes, basically, well, you're lucky because all the chemicals controlled by Rotterdam and Basel, they are in the list that you will distribute, the HS codes. But in the future, or if you want to have other HS codes for other substances which are controlled and not in the list, you can refer to the 6. This is the most recommendable database that is kept up to date by the European Union and is freely accessible. So you only need the CAS number as an identifier just to see the HS code. It's the only place that you can do it, that you can see the HS code.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel. I think the rest of the comments are quite, and the questions are quite similar to what we have read before. And maybe if there are any additional questions that we haven't addressed, we will try addressing them in the Ask the Expert session after this training in the Green Forum. So please feel free to send us the questions if you have any to Melissa. Melissa unfortunately had to leave early. But if you have any additional questions, please let us know by email, and we will be sharing the video recordings of this session, including all the materials and very useful slides, well structured by Daniel for us by email as a follow-up to this session, together with the list of chemicals and the reference pocket list on the chemicals and HS codes controlled under Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions. So I guess that's all. Daniel, or maybe colleagues from Lao, if you would like to add anything before we wrap up.
Just thanking you, especially because I was in contact with you, and to the participants, thank you for the patience. It was a long topic. In the presentation is more information, and what I try to do is just to provide you links. So if you have time, you can you have more knowledge looking at the links in the presentation, and I try to condense everything there.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and many thanks to Melissa. Many thanks to our colleagues from Lao PDR, colleagues from GEF Farm in UNDP, and all the countries and all the participants, customs officers and environmental officers that were attending the session today. Many thanks to everyone. We'll share the presentations and the recordings. And thanks to interpreters who supported this session. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye, and have a great day and afternoon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.